Lassen, and I call him Danish genius. He's maybe been below the radar for a lot of people, but he's really a brilliant coach and a mentor for many people, and he knows something about implementing stuff and how we can all these things here, because nothing here is important if it doesn't be put into action. But there's enormous things that can happen if it's awakened and then put into action, right? So I'm really happy that Michael, something like that, that he would be a part of the end session here and share some tools for you and inspiration how you can take the next step. Because this is a bright mind, and he's working international with very, very interesting people. So I'm actually very proud that he will come to my seminar and be a part of it. And he's been here, and he's a great friend. He's extremely generous. You know, some people, if you ask them about the things, they give you some few nuggets, and then you have to pay a whole lot to hear the rest. And of course, if it's the work, you should not take advantage because they're kind or nice. But he is really generous, and it's really good, really good. I've been to programs and talked to people in this industry who are the top of the top. And every time I talk with Michael, I feel that he's actually there. It's the best ideas, strategies. You cannot get it better. So please give him a super, super awesome Awaken Your Audience. Welcome to Lassen.
So, I'm going to talk about speed of implementation, and what that means is that you minimize the time between getting an idea until you take the first action step, or between making a decision and taking the first action step. And I heard about the concept 10 years ago at a seminar, and it was one of the first things that was talked about. And what happened is that a rather famous guy in the marketing world, he listened to that and he realized, oh shit, that's true. And he went to his hotel room and he left the seminar. It was supposed to last for 5 days, and then he implemented and created his first blockbuster success program. And so now I know why Steinar wanted me to go last, because if I said that Friday morning, we could have had a situation. That's all right. So when I heard about that, and the fact that it was presented as the #1 thing that successful people have in common, I went, that's cool. I need to do that. I want to do that. It's not as easy as I thought it would be, because there's 3 primary things that will keep you from using speed of implementation. And I had a lifelong flirt with all 3 of them. The first one is procrastination, the second one is perfectionism, and the third one is fear. And with procrastination, I was this close to getting voted the president of the United World Procrastinators. This close. The only thing that, was in the way is we never actually got around to do the voting. So. But it was close. and I literally have my picture in Perfectionist Hall of Fame, and fear is a very, very known thing to me, for sure. So when I started thinking about it, I looked back at my life and I realized that the major successes I've had was in fact when I have utilized speed of implementation. And I would not be here if it hadn't been for, I would say, sheer luck of using speed of implementation. Because what happened when I was around 20 years old, I was taking a nap one afternoon, and I woke up, and instead of taking something to drink or something to eat, I turned on the television, and flip the channels. And I stopped when I saw there was this huge American guy. Yeah, it's Tony, of course. and he was presented as the world's #1 motivation guy and peak performance coach. And okay, I'll give it a minute. And I was just about to turn off when he started talking about phobias. And I had a major phobia at the time of needles, which was a drunk doctor trying to take a blood sample when I was 4 years old. It's a very good recipe if you want to have a phobia. and I went, that's interesting. And he talked about his book. And I looked at my clock and I went, I can just make it into the main bookstore in the center of Copenhagen if I leave like right now. So I did. I took my bike, I got in there, bought the book, went back, read it. An hour into it, there's an exercise about phobias. And I'm kind of excited. And so I read it. It takes about 10 minutes. And for the first time in 15 years, I could think about needles without going into a panic or flinching or something like that. And I go, that's interesting. And so I asked my mom straight away, who has worked with psychology in the psychiatric world for many, many years. And I say, hey mom, just wondering, how long does it typically take to work with phobias? And she says, well, typically it's 3 to 6 months and you slowly have to expose yourself to the thing. And I went, that's interesting, because I just got rid of mine in 10 minutes. So a lifelong interest in personal development and mindset stuff was brought just there. Just a second. So the next big thing that happens is around 7 years ago, and at that time I'm doing a lot of mindset stuff in all kinds of different areas. And a friend calls me up and say, hey Michael, I got some problems. I want to hire you. And I said, sure, what's up? And he says, well, he had 10 young guys in a coaching program where he was teaching them how to become more successful with women, with girls, with dating. And something was not going the way he had thought it would go. And I went, all right, I like a good challenge. So I get in there and I start to coach them one by one. And I realized to my horror that the first assignment that they got was to go out and approach 50 women each day. And the scale of how they reacted to it was on the one end of the scale, it was like, really? Are you crazy? Or for real? And all the way over to, fuck! And it wasn't working at all. So I find myself having coaching sessions with them. And I think it's the second one where all of a sudden I get this almost out-of-body experience. And it's almost like I look at myself saying stuff. And what I'm saying to him is that, how about you think about it this way? That before you take an action step, and this, I came up with a model right then and there that I've used ever since in all kinds of different areas. So play along here. I said to him, think about it this way. When you take an action step, in this case, approaching a woman, only one of 3 positive things can happen, and you control them. The first thing is that you get your goal. You know, whatever your intention is, whatever the sub-goal is, you get it. That's pretty cool. The second part is that you don't get your goal, but you get to learn something that you need to in order to go to the next step, in order to go to maybe 3rd or 4th base or something like that, if we talk about that context. And that might be crucial. That might be even more important than getting the first part of the goal. And then I said, and the third cool thing that can happen is that you don't get your goal, there's nothing you can learn, and just for a split second, I wondered what I was going to say. And what I said is that you get to practice maybe your #1 ability, which is to keep your focus where it empowers you the most. So from having this weird task they had to do, all of a sudden they could see it that now they were in control of having to go out and collect 50 new building blocks in their foundation. And as everybody knows that if you have to build a tall building, you need a pretty wide foundation. And all of a sudden they had the control of it, which is really powerful. So I started using that, coaching professional poker players, salespeople, it worked really, really well for all kinds of different areas. And And it struck me as a part of the speed of implementation, because if you know in advance that before you take an action that you have the control of one of 3 outcomes, that makes it at least a lot easier. So then a couple of years later, I'm doing a seminar, and part of it is going to be about fear, because fear is pretty widely known as the #1 thing that you can take all negative emotions and sort of tie into having something to do with fear. And so I was reading a study about cancer, and I don't know if it's true or not, but the study said that the way cancer cell works in the body is that if there's enough oxygen in that part of the body, the cancer cell cannot survive. So I went, if fear was sort of the mindset equivalent of cancer, if I could come up with an environment that would make fear not be able to survive, what would need to be there? And I went, oh, the 3 model of one of those 3 things. And then I was going to do an exercise in that seminar about values and clarifying values and decide which values should go first. And I thought, well, if we take the value of growing and learning and we put it on top, and I've challenged people ever since, if you can find a value that will have more long-term positive consequences than growing and learning. And if you combine that with that 3-step model, where can fear fit into that equation? And I haven't come up with an answer so far, which is intriguing for me. So I like good questions. And what happened a couple of weeks ago is I was invited to a mastermind in Cyprus to participate and to speak. And I decided I was going to talk about speed of implementation, because I got some new ideas, some of which I have and will talk about today. And then on the way down there, I thought, okay, I need to ask better questions. So I asked myself, well, if there was people in a certain context that had to use speed of implementation, what would that be? And a face popped up of someone I knew called Joe Polish, who's known in the US for having a really big mastermind and being a great marketer. And I remembered, oh, Joe, he has his passion project around addicts. And I went, addicts? That's what addicts do, is that they create a big picture of the next high, and they make a decision that, fuck it, they need to go there. And that's all there is to it. No thinking about the long-term consequences, just seeing the big picture, and then doing it. And I realized, that's genius if we can take that process and apply it into speed of implementation. And then I realized, hey, I have an exercise that actually mirrors that. And it's an exercise that Tony Robbins, he learned or borrowed from Richard Bandler in the 80s. And if you've tried it before, just go along, because there's going to be a second part to it. So what I want you to do is, I want you to stand up, all of you. And I want you to put 2 fingers straight ahead. And then I want all of you to turn to the right and see how far you can go. And remember exactly where you get to. Yeah, and see if you can get around each other. Okay, and then move back. And I want you to stand still, but close your eyes. And as you're closing your eyes, I want you to visualize and imagine what it's going to feel like to turn around, and this time you're getting a bit further than the first time. So visualize it while you're standing still. What's it going to feel like? What's it going to look like as you pass the first point and you get further the second time? And then once you're done, open your eyes and see how far you can go this time. And how many did get further the second time? That's pretty much everybody. So that's an exercise, and stand up, please stand. That's an exercise that's been done in many seminars for many years. And like I said, I love good questions. And I love the question of, if I could do this even better, how would I? If I could add something into this, what would that be? And at the time, I was having this project of asking people what went through their mind as they made a powerful decision. And I remember the first one I asked the question, it was something with, fuck it, I need to do something. The second was, fuck it, I'm done with this. The third one was, fuck it, I need to improve my life. The fourth one was something else. And then it came fifth, sixth, seventh. So my short hack of this is to go, fuck it, I can go further this time. And if you want to hack it even more, you can think about a time when you made a powerful decision and get into that, get associated with that, and then repeat with everybody that, fuck it, I can go further this time. So if someone is extremely religious or really don't like the word fuck, you can go, gosh darn it, or something like that in your native language. That's perfectly fine with me. It's gonna work just as well. So I want you to repeat after me and go, fuck it, I can go further this time.
Fuck it, I can go further this time.
That was pretty good, and we all know we can do it better. So let's do it one more time and go, fuck it, I can go further this time.
Fuck it, I can go further this time.
Okay, and then see how far you can go this time.
Hello.
We can do that afterwards. We'll do it afterwards. And how many got further the second time as well? Cool. All right, you can sit down again. All right, so what I liked about that exercise, both parts, is that it demonstrates how important it is to see where you're going and how important it is to make a decision that's emotional, that's powerful. And another thing that's really important is around beliefs, that sometimes you can't see yourself going there. And then it becomes pretty difficult to visualize. So I remember not too long ago, I was at an event and I got introduced to this young girl who wanted to be a speaker and wanted to be a coach. And it was very obvious to herself and to me that she didn't believe she could. And I got an intuition what would help her. So I decided to first teach her a little bit. So I told her that, well, it really only takes about 1,000 people who resonate with you. 1,000 people who like you, who are fans. And if you know what you're doing, you can make a solid six-figure income in dollars. If you really know what you're doing, you can even potentially get it to 7. And she was like, oh, 1,000. And so I teach her a bit and say, yeah, well, that requires you get the first one. And then you have to double that. And then you have to double it again. And you have to double it again, and we're only at 8, and we have to double. And she was not seeing it. So then I switched it, and I said to her, I heard this weird thing, that in the US, there's this thing called the Flat Earth Society, and they have around 7,000 paying members every month. And not only that, I also heard that there's another place where they meet every month, they pay every month, and they discuss how they were abducted by aliens and molested, and they have 7,500 members. And she was starting to, and I said, so do you believe that out of 6 billion people, or however many we are, that you can find just 1,000? And she just lit up like a Christmas tree, because all of a sudden she could see it. In that contrast, it made sense for her that even her, like starting out, that would be possible. So having the ability to see that and see things from a right perspective can be really powerful. I remember a funny story from my own life is when I moved in with my then girlfriend and now wife, we decided that if we were going to do it, we were going to do it really good. So we rented a really, really nice apartment that was really my dream apartment, and it had, you know, huge view, and it was appraised at the time at exactly $1 million. So I was so thrilled. I got my $1 million apartment. Yeah, it's probably on my vision board someplace in the basement or something like that. But there was one challenge, is that the new apartment had the kitchen and the view and the living room, and where I used to live, the kitchen had a door, which meant that I didn't necessarily did the dishes every day, if I have to put it mildly. That doesn't work when you can see the kitchen non-stop. So the dishes would pile up, and I would go, oh, I have to do the fucking dishes. I have to do the fucking dishes. And I went, well, I kind of know better than this. So I flipped it around, and I started looking at it that I had to make the kitchen look as beautiful and congruent with what had been my dreams for several years. And just by looking at it from the positive aspect made a big difference. And it reminds me of also when I went to IKEA with a couple friends of mine, and they saw this beautiful set of 10 dishes. And the girl, she said, "Oh, isn't that cute, honey? We can have 8 people for dinner." And I went, 10 dishes? That means I don't have to do the dishes for at least a week. So now I got the problem solved, because I could see it as something that was beautiful, as something that was powerful for me. And it's funny how just single words can make such a big difference. So just by the fact that you think about a situation as a problem versus a challenge actually makes a big difference. You can monitor that with brainwaves and EEG machines, or whatever it's called, that you have access to different resources depending on what words you're using. And that reminds me of Richard Bandler, who was one of my early mentors. He's the founder of Neuro-Linguistic Programming. He did some really interesting test cases with brainwave level measurement. That what is usually done when you measure brainwave levels and you use it for training is that you measure where you are at. And that means that, so if you're at alpha, you get feedback on that. And as you go lower, you will get other types of feedback, so you can register it. But Bandler did something different. He found a way that you got the feedback of where you were going, not where you were. And when they made that switch, it was within minutes that people could go into deep levels of the mind that usually would have taken a long time to do with normal brainwave training or even just with meditation, because it was measuring and giving feedback to where they were going. And that made a huge difference. And literally it was in minutes that people could do something that would have taken them months and months. So this is one of the most important things about speed of implementation, is that what happens when you take action is that it forces you to look at where you're going. Versus if you don't take action, you're focusing on where you are. And the other thing is that if you don't take action on something, then it typically has to do with the fact that something is missing, something is lacking. And like Steinar was talking about earlier today, is that what you focus on, you tend to get more of. That's one of the things I found interesting in the whole success field, is on the complete left of spirituality and on the complete other side of pure business, use all people to get financial gains, they had the same experience, that what you focus on, you get more of. So, okay, there has to be something to it. So, if you don't take action, that means that there's a big chance that you're focusing on the lack, what's missing. And that means that that can kickstart a downward spiral, which can be very, very consequential down the line. Versus that when you take the action, you focus on where you're going. And with what we already talked about, you know in advance that there's only 3 positive outcomes, and you have the value of wanting to grow and learn. That's a pretty good combination. And then comes the thing that perfectionists always say, and I've been there, is that, well, I'm not ready. And I got news for you. You won't ever be. Well, I mean, in a couple of weeks, there's going to be the European Football Championships finals, and I'm going to be sitting in my couch. I'm going to have the beer, I'm going to have the chips, I might have a burger, and I am going to be freaking ready. But that's about the only time where you can be ready for something. If we talk about success, there's no such thing as being ready, because if you get to that point, you will definitely have missed some momentum, you will have missed some learning, you will have missed some information. So we have to take that out of the equation. And for example, I really like Michael Jordan as a human being, as the great basketball player that he was. And he's one of the ones who really talk about the power of failure, and says openly that the only reason he got to where he was is that he failed more than everybody else. Now we can talk about if failure is the right word, but the willingness to fail that much, and shooting when he was not ready, going for it when he was not ready, it's like, well, if all the best performers are willing to fail more, and we don't believe that we need to do it, If you're the unicorn, I'd love to interview you, seriously. So please let me know if it just so happens to be that you're one of the unicorns. So the other thing is that, going back to the 3 model, is that the second part, which is that there's something you can learn. I developed something from that I call life lessons extraction, which is that you take a negative experience and you figure out what could you learn from that, and then you apply that into the future, making it into a commitment that, damn, I've learned these lessons, and you see and feel how that's going to empower you. And what I believe that is, I believe that's the ultimate way of taking self-responsibility and taking self-reliance, because you've taken something that would have held most people back, and you take it and you grow from it. And so what I believe is that self-reliance and self-responsibility is 2 of the most powerful personal skills we can have. And 2 of the most destructive ones, and if we have a scale of the most destructive ones and how easy it is to fall into, I believe that blaming and having the victim mentality is right there. So we have this scale of, on the one hand, we have victim and blaming, and on the other hand, we have self-reliance and self-responsibility. And what I think is a crucial thing about speed of implementation is that every time you take that action, you're putting a deposit into your self-reliance account, into your self-responsibility. And every time you're waiting, because you need to be ready, or you need this extra thing, blah, 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 there's a big chance that you're making a deposit toward the other end of the scale. And to me, that's motivating. That's a very proactive way of thinking about it, is that every day you have the chance to put in deposits in your self-reliance, in your self-responsibility account, getting new building blocks into your foundation. And so the final 2 points is that the other thing I've seen every time someone getting an idea and going for a project is that somewhere on that thing, which is never a straight line, is doubt will creep in. And the thing is, you can never predict when that doubt is gonna come in, or if it's gonna hit you, so it's gonna be game over. Depends on where you are, who you're with, how much resourceful you are at the time. But the point is that the faster you take that action step, the bigger the chance is that the doubt has no time to set in. So you're eliminating the doubt the faster you make a decision. So you're moving the potential game stopper away from not having any thing to do whatsoever. So to me, that's a huge point, is speed of implementation, taking action, removes doubt, it pushes it away. And just here at the last part, to sort of comfort some of you former perfectionists, is I want to mention something that you're really going to like, which is that speed of implementation should never be an excuse for doing a sloppy job, ever. It should be about hitting the point where good enough is good enough, as a baseline, as the automatic thing you're going for. There's definitely going to be times where it's good to go for great or even for awesome, and just know why you're going for that. Know what the intention is behind it, because usually good enough is good enough. And the other thing about perfectionism I've realized, I never thought about it until a few weeks ago, is that if we take the people who are making the most money and are the most happy, are they ever the best at what they do? Maybe Michael Jordan, but I don't know about the happiness part. But I haven't found a single example of someone who's the best and the most happy, who make the most money and is the most happy, who's also the best. I think that's worth considering. I really like to use Dr. Phil as an example. He wrote one of the best-selling weight loss books. It's kind of obvious he probably didn't go through it himself. And from everybody I know who's read it, it's not by far the best book at all. And the same thing maybe for his psychology skills. I'm not going to be a judge on that, since I'm not a psychologist. So I think that's worth remembering, that if you hit that good enough point and you take a lot of action towards that, and you remember that every time you take an action, you're making a deposit into your self-reliance, into your self-responsibility. You're reaffirming your value, whether it's number 1 or number 2, of growing and learning, and you know that you're building building blocks for your foundation. And then if you add in the sort of addict drill that we did, that you see the picture of the action, and then you go, fuck it, let's do it. I think you have a pretty good recipe for taking more action. Agree?
Yes.
All right, so that's basically it. I really hope that you're gonna decide now after it's over, take one decision and take an action step today. And remember that it doesn't have to be you release something or propose to someone or something crazy. It can be as simple as asking someone something. It doesn't have to be a huge thing. It's the small, consistent things that will get you typically to where you want to go. So thank you very much for playing along, and I hope you find this useful.
Thank you, Michael. Really good, and I think we could need some of that after such a weekend. We need speed of implementation, and you know what we are going to do now is that I still want to, even if I've been a little bit challenged by the time, and I want to end at 4 o'clock. But I want to do, I want you to have a few minutes to where you are able to ask questions to Michael and perhaps me. So we are here on stage now, and if you have questions, he's really sharp marketing mind. And you can hear that. So we take a few questions, and then I'll end and give you a recipe when you go home and build your presentation. So let's do that. We have a question here. Okay.
Can someone film that Steiner's my mic runner? It's just for ego purposes.
So my name is Vincent Sassi, and I'm highly inspired by what you just shared with us. It's like the missing piece of I'm launching my first big webinar tonight,
Cool.
and
Yeah, let's clap it up.
it's called The 7 Steps to Your Dream Life.
Nice.
And you just gave me a perfect quote, but do you have a website, and would it be okay if I actually quote you and link to your website from that?
Yes, as a matter of fact, the website got done a few days ago with the help of the lovely Ia, and it's nicely, beautifully imperfect. Because that's the thing I realized, that with speed of implementation, I'm going to be held accountable to a really high standard. I cannot sit for more than 30 seconds ordering a meal and people are going to elbow me and say, hey, aren't you the speed of implementation guy? So yeah, there is a site, it's called thespeedofimplementation.com, and you can see the video from the mastermind presentation I did, and I'm also going to be doing an expanded webinar on the things I didn't have time for here and back there. So yeah, I appreciate that.
Thanks a lot.
I'm still a runner.
Just a question, if I'm inspired of this too, of course. If I have this long list of decisions that I should have taken action on,
Yeah.
how do you cope with that? You know, then you have 40 decisions that you want to do, but it's maybe just a day or 2 days ago.
Well, I would say two things. Do you know the passion test from Janet Atwood? It's where you compare two different things. When you have a long list of something, whether it's passions or in this case projects, you can take them and compare them one by one. For example, asking the question, well, if I knew which one of these things that would make the biggest overall difference, which one would it be? And then you can get a pretty good clarity of which one is going to be at least in the top. The other thing, once you get more clarity, is that I like to do an exercise where you visualize those things, but at the opposite end of the wall. So let's say you have 5 or 6. You visualize the different possibilities, opportunities, projects, and just by getting that visually, that space will quite often make it obvious which one to go for first. It's funny because when I do that exercise with clients, I always ask, so is there one of the pictures that stands out? And I swear one time, there was one guy who said, yeah, one of them is like, has a neon sign around it. And I said, well, would it be possible that maybe that was the most important thing? And yeah, when I think about it, yeah, it actually would. So those two things would be really good in that situation. And making the decision to do one of them, whether you find the number one is more important, because then you'll get some information, then you'll get some learning.
We're here.
Yeah.
Thank you for all your inspiration.
Thank you.
I was just kind of curious about this, about doubt.
Yeah.
Because I have periods where I'm very highly speeded and take actions to lots of things, and then I lose the overblik.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
The
about,
overview.
yeah, that's one. Udfordring. The other thing about doubt is sometimes I make a quick decision, and then afterwards I said, was it a good decision? And then the doubt gets...
Well, that's the thing, is that speed of implementation is taking the decision and chaining it up to the first action step. So making a decision still allows for doubt, but once you get moving, you're focusing on where you're going, and then it's about taking the next action step. And also, I use the word speed of integration, which is that once you've taken that first action step, then you need to integrate what you can learn from that. And then it's really about filling up the glass, so it's not about is it half empty or half full. No, you're filling up the glass with your focus and taking action, which in case will make doubt be really doubtful if it's going to be right. But of course, sometimes it can be deeper lying beliefs or something like that, and you would need to work on that. But if you actually do these things and doubt is still there, at least you know, okay, you need to dig deeper.
Good, thank you. We can have 2 more questions. More questions? Yes? From Scotland! Yeah!
I have a couple of things to say. Firstly, did I see you playing poker on telly one time?
Probably not, but I could have been the coach on the sideline.
I thought I saw you something.
Yeah.
I'd like to say thank you to Steinar for this whole event. I, as an English-speaking or Scottish-speaking person, think that all of you have got some fantastic English language skills. It's incredible for me to see you spending 3 days in English in your own country with all the Dutch people, the Danish people around. I am just blown away by it, so thank you very much for that. It feels like it's in my honour. And I really like what you were saying, it's been very inspirational. And Steinar, obviously. Thank you.
Thank you. More questions? Yes?
It's one question from this morning
Okay.
I didn't get to. It's not really a question, but since this weekend has been about getting on stage, there's one thing that I would like to say to you guys, but it's actually not an issue here. If you're on stage in black clothes, you end up looking like a floating head. And all the people that have been up on stage this weekend has not been in black clothes. So, high five!
Okay.
I think it's just my aura, but that's my personal.
Okay, so Eva Karin had a question, and you can ask it. I can answer afterwards.
Yes, I'm from Sweden, and I'm transitioning into an international audience. So right now, my email list is a mix of Swedish and English. And how do I know that my written English is good enough? Because I know when I read in Swedish someone that is not writing it properly, I think I don't trust that person.
Yes. So, talking about going into English, this is of course a common question many of you have. I would say, as she said to me, because she asked this in the break, of course, people when you speak like I do now, with all these language faults and this has and have and all that grammar stuff, actually I know it, but when I'm on stage, I don't, you know, it goes wrong for me. But people can handle that. You do it in a video, they see you, and it doesn't matter at all. When you write, there is a little bit difference because people are more harsh. The typos or the faults stands out of the text and disturbs. So you probably, I don't believe you need to be perfect. You need to be authentic, and if it shines through that you are from another country, also, you know, you probably will have a lot of people from around the world, different not English-speaking countries, reading your stuff. They will, for them, there will not be a big issue. But you can go, my suggestion is go into Fiverr.com, Fiverr.com, which is a place where you can find people who can check your language. And you send it to them, and the next day you have a perfect example or a script from your email or blog article. Fiverr.com. It's basically a Fiverr, $5 for some work. So it's very, very cheap. I would do that. I've started contacting people who can translate or who can do what's listening? Proofreading. And they don't take much money for it. So some people are very professional. They use like 10 minutes and they cost you $1 or $2. That's my suggestion.
Also, I would ask a different question, which is that would you really want your ideal clients to focus more on that part than the content part, than the authenticity part? So you could also potentially look at it as a way of getting rid of the ones who has a focus that is likely to cause you trouble down the line. I'm going to bet that that's going to be the refunders. It's going to be the one who doesn't take action on your stuff. It's going to be those guys and gals who notice that stuff, and the other ones won't care. So you could even use it mentally as, hey, bring it on. If you want to challenge me, delete. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's the same actually when you have seminars and other stuff. Some people are so focused on the people who are out in the, who are not your core group. But those people are not your core customers either. They want to have things for free, and they want to kind of follow you, but they cause you a lot of problems also sometimes. So it's better to be authentic and say, okay, if you want to follow me, if you think that's valuable, and if you think, yeah, I support it.
It's also, and that's a general thing, if you're trying to set up the perception that what you do is perfect, what you're almost training people to do is notice for the mistakes.
Yes.
Isn't it?
Okay. So I really like that that you brought in that perspective, and I love that Michael could be here. So give him a huge hand. Huge hand. Thank you. Okay, so I need the microphone, Nicholas, and now.
Michael, your name? Someone's asking for your name?
Just a second. Michael. Okay.
Michael Lassen.
Lassen.
Thank you. Michael hvad? L-A-S-S-E-N. Mads hvad? Er det ikke det, der hedder det?